when I was a working dispatcher, I did not receive a lot of training reference, just general stress management, healthy coping tools. One of the things that we love at the 911 Training Institute is we have the saying, no cookie cutter solutions. What are the unique challenges that your agency is experiencing? And then what kind of initiatives and incentives can we create to support the employees serving at this agency? Because it's not the same as an agency on the other side of the county. One of the things that we want to do at the 911 Training Institute is empower them to serve at their will for as long as they want, and they leave on their terms.
Welcome to another episode of Responder Resilience. Along with my co-host, Dr. Stacy Raymond, I'm David Dashinger. In this episode, we'll be speaking with Ryan Dedmon. He's the Outreach Director for the 911 Training Institute. We'll be talking about the Institute and some tools and strategies for 911 professionals and how Ryan's paying forward his time behind the console to help first responders recover and grow from post-traumatic stress. Remember to like and subscribe YouTube, Responder Resilience, Facebook, Responder Wellness Inc., and Responder TV. We're on LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and check out our website, respondertv.com, for past episodes and guest information. We'll be right back to speak with Ryan after this.
In this family, more of us die by our own hands than by the hazards of the job.
In this family, up to a quarter of 911 telecommunicators have symptoms of post-traumatic stress.
In this family, our mental health and wellness are in crisis,
while responders are quietly suffering.
In this family, many struggle with job-related stress,
burnout, trauma, sleep disruptions, substance abuse,
and relationship problems.
In this family, we can help the helpers
with vital information and resources,
resilient strategies,
and success stories of overcoming the obstacles.
In this family, no one is alone. Welcome to Responder Resilience with co-hosts retired Lieutenant David Dashinger, Dr. Stacy Raymond, and Bonnie Rimley, LCSW EMTB. We want to welcome Ryan Dedmon. Ryan is the Outreach Director for the 911 Training Institute, which is a private company that provides training and consulting services. He's a retired police dispatcher from Southern California, and in 2012, the Southern California chapter of APCO International named him Telecommunicator of the Year. Since retiring in 2013, Ryan's been immersed in the world of public safety training. He holds a Master of Arts degree in forensic psychology, and he's a certified CIT coordinator. He's also a California post-certified academy instructor, and he blends his education and experience behind the console to help first responders recover and grow from post-traumatic stress. Ryan, really glad to have you here on Responder Resilience.
Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I think this has been a long time coming between you and I.
It is, and here we are. So
here we are. Hello, Dr. Raymond.
Hi. So I'd like to get started, Ryan, and just if you could tell us and the audience, just to bookend your career as a dispatcher, what got you into the profession, and then what led you to retire from being a dispatcher?
Oh, such a loaded question. So I got into the profession kind of by accident. Growing up, I always knew I wanted to work in law enforcement. I thought that's what I wanted to do with my life. And so I was taking steps to prepare for that field of work through high school and in college. And then my senior year of college, I needed an internship in order to graduate. And so I walked into the lobby of the Anaheim Police Department in Anaheim, California, and was fortunate enough to strike an internship with the gang division there. And so I started my career just as a little college intern, needing to do some hours for an educational requirement. So I did 6 months as an intern, and then upon completion of that internship, the department hired me to be a police cadet, which is like a step under police officer. And then my career just progressed through there. I was looking, though, to work out in the field as a police officer. So I was not familiar with anything in 911 communications. I wanted to be out on patrol as a police officer. And it was kind of by accident that I ended up in a communications center, which is where I did a majority of my career. For a very brief period, I was a police officer, but that did not work out, and I was not a good fit for that job. It was not a good fit for me. And then I accidentally kind of ended up in a communications center where I spent another 10 years. I retired in 2013, but the circumstances of my retirement are a lot about, it's a lot about what I speak about, because it wasn't planned. I basically voluntarily resigned overnight in a moment of crisis after having difficulty coping with some suicide calls that I had handled at work. And after a couple of weeks on leave off of work, I just decided to pull the plug. And so I sent an email overnight saying, I'm done. And that was November of 2013.
So Ryan, from that perspective, because clearly you've taken those experiences and kind of parlayed them forward to your career as it is today, how does that change or kind of drive what you speak about today when you're out there training and going to conferences?
Yeah, I have come to understand that, there's a lot of first responders in 911, law enforcement, fire service, and EMS. And I don't know what my perception was while I was still working, but I guess I didn't understand the full spectrum of the emergency response system and how all of these fields work together and how we're all exposed to significant amounts of trauma. It's almost like I just became so calloused that, these types of traumatic calls were just routine, if you will. And we didn't talk about them. We didn't deal with them. We lived by an emotional code where, it's the strong, silent type survive. And that is how I dealt with stress and trauma in my career. And it wasn't until after I retired that I started to realize that, every first responder in every field of public safety has some kind of story of traumatic experiences they have been exposed to through the course of their career, but then also just through the course of life, right? Because life happens and it doesn't stop just because you're a firefighter or a police officer or a dispatcher or an EMT. So it's the totality of the circumstances of life that just get put together where you start to realize that, man, everybody has a story. And mine is any more different than a lot of other first responders. Maybe the outcome and the manner in which I decided to leave is different. But that's one of the things I try to talk about, because I don't want first responders to feel like they have to pull that plug.
Right.
One of the things that we want to do at the 911 Training Institute is empower them to serve at their will for as long as they want, and they leave on their terms.
Sure.
And so even if that's not a 30-year, tour of duty, maybe it's only 10, but even if that 10, they leave because they want to, and they made the choice, and it wasn't trauma or stress or other extenuating circumstances that kind of forced their hand at that point. So I bring all of that together and wrap it up in mental health and wellness and peer support, which is what I love talking about, to try and educate first responders just to look at their career differently through a different lens.
Calling all mental health professionals, join us for the Clinician Masterclass series working with first responders, and empower your practice with expert insights and actionable strategies, brought to you by the Responder Resilience Podcast. This isn't your typical podcast. Dive deep on working with EMS and 911 personnel with seasoned therapists Dr. Nicole Navega and Bonnie Rumely. Sonny Provetto shares specific knowledge and tools to support police. Dr. Stacy Raymond offers professional insights on working with veterans. Dr. Robbie Adler-Tapia covers working with firefighters in a clinical setting. And Dr. Kristen Weldon explores cultural competency and the fire service. Get ready to transform your practice. Subscribe and stream anytime on our channels, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Stay in the loop and sign up now at ResponderTV.com.
So can you elaborate on any concrete tools that 911 dispatchers can use so that they can stay in the job willingly and in a healthy fashion?
Yeah, well, a lot of what we do at the 911 Training Institute is education first. When I was a working dispatcher, I did not receive a lot of training reference, just general stress management, healthy coping tools. Mm-hmm. We just didn't talk about dispatcher wellness, just like law enforcement did not talk about officer wellness in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. It's just not things we discussed. Firefighter wellness, EMT, paramedic wellness, we just weren't talking about that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so even now, today in 2024, I'm still surprised at some of my travels around the country where I go to speak on these kind of things, and dispatchers still just don't have a real grasp of some of those tools that they can utilize, whether on duty or off duty in their personal life, to help optimize their overall health and wellness. And so some of the tools that we talk about specifically are developed by the Institute of HeartMath. So we focus on a lot of heart-focused breathing and quick coherence technique to help dispatchers basically reset their psychophysiology in almost near real time while they're sitting at a console behind a desk and a computer handling even calls, right? They can do a couple of quick, simple things to try and regain control of that fight or flight response that they might be experiencing.
Do you encourage 911 dispatchers to actually have like the HeartMath biofeedback sensor, that plugs into their phone? There's an inner balance program that I show some of my first responder clients, and they can see when they are in the red zone, and they're usually in fight or flight. And then through the breathing techniques that you mentioned, they can actually get themselves into blue and then green. Green would be coherent heart rate variability. So would you encourage 911 dispatchers to perhaps, have that with them so that they can see what's happening to them physiologically while they're at work, or no?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, so Jim Marshall, who is the CEO of the 911 Training Institute, and Dr. Rick Janka are both licensed mental health professionals in the state of Michigan. I believe they've received some very specialized training from the Institute of HeartMath reference, providing that training then secondhand to first responders. And so if you take one of our training classes, Jim is known for bringing that equipment with him to the training classroom and hooking up a student in front of the class so that they can see in real time that heart rate variability and how coherence is then achieved and the difference.
This is what you're talking about, Ryan, right? This is the equipment for HeartMath. It's the inner balance. Oops. And there's a sensor in there that attaches to the ear and plugs into the phone. And so they have, for both Android and for iPhone, different versions. And then the person can actually in real time see how stressed out that they actually are. So I think it's a fabulous tool. Anyway.
Yeah, one of the things I talk about is I'm not trained to use that equipment. So I don't use it in trainings that I have, but what I do as some type of assessment tool is, I will ask a person before doing those exercises, to do some introspection and ask them, on a scale of 1 to 10, how ramped up, amped up, and stressed, quote unquote, do you feel right now? And they give a number based on their feelings, and then we run through a couple of those exercises, and then I ask them again, and more often than not, the number has decreased.
Right.
So even just that simple assessment proves to them that, okay, this is not some type of voodoo kumbaya science that doesn't make any sense. It puts it in very practical terms that they can understand. If I was a 10 and now I'm a 6, well then, one of the exercises that I just did obviously worked, and I don't feel as stressed or worked up as I did moments ago. So then they are more apt to regularly utilize those types of skills in their life. As opposed to, seeing a chart on screen of someone else, and, you're thinking, oh, that's a cool demonstration of, Stacy, the dispatcher. But how does that apply to me, Ryan? Well, if I think about it for myself and I think about, well, how does Ryan feel right now? Man, Ryan is feeling like an 8 because I got stuff going on at work. I got stuff going on in my personal life. Now I run through some of these exercises and wow, now I feel like a 4.
Right. And so by in vivo experiencing a decrease in distress level or tension level, it really proves to the client, the first responder, that this stuff really works. And just as an aside, you don't have to buy the equipment that I just showed, but it is something that I'll use in session to demonstrate, that the person they themselves, without alcohol, marijuana, or whatever else that they might want to use, they can bring down their stress level themselves.
Yeah, I love it. It's an eye-opening experience, especially watching kind of the light flick on in the minds of students as they see that kind of demonstration in real time. And then they come to grasp the understanding that, wow, this stuff does really work. And I understand it. I don't need a PsyD or a PhD in order to understand how my psychophysiology works now.
Right.
Yeah, and I just wanted to underscore that, what you're talking about, Ryan, are tools and hacks, if you will, that people can use on the job, right? Like in between calls, something like a breathing exercise, just to lower that stress level so that they're not at a 8 or a 10 for whatever it is their shift is, 8, 10, 12 hours. How huge that is to kind of just put them more in control, empower them to, to be able to do something about that stress level and to kind of reset before the next call.
LT, and it's one of the most ironic things, especially for someone serving in a communications center, because as a dispatcher with a hysterical caller, one of the very first things that we tell callers to do to try and calm the situation so that they can regain control of themselves is to pause and take a deep breath really quick. I'm going to ask you some questions. And more often than not, when we do that with callers, we're able to collaborate with them to get the information that we need in order to, dispatch the truck. And it's like we do that for callers, and we've been trained to do that for public callers for so long, but we've never thought to really do that for ourselves in near real time either.
Along those lines, because I've heard this from 911 professionals, there is a profound sense of helplessness sometimes when a caller calls and they're in that hysterical mode and they can't, kind of get them calmed down quick enough to get the pertinent information to send out the units, or just in general, they're unable to kind of feel like they're contributing to the success of a call because the caller is so, stressed out. Do you have any ideas or perspective on what 911 professionals can do in those circumstances?
Well, that is definitely a very unique stressor that is distinct to the duties of a dispatcher that field responders don't experience. I think field responders have the opportunity to do other things when people are not cooperative, because they're present on scene and they can rely on other senses, if you will, observation and hearing of what's going on. But dispatchers are only dealing with someone, over the phone.
Right.
And if you're not listening to me over the phone, and my auditory sense of hearing is the only sense that I have to work with, besides typing onto a computer, it creates very strong feelings of helplessness, because I want to get the information to know what's going on so that I can provide it to field crews who are responding, so that they know what apparatus and equipment to take with them to serve the best outcome. But that is very, very frustrating sometimes. But a dear friend of mine actually put it in a really good perspective not long ago for me. And she said, as dispatchers, we answer 911 emergency calls. We are professional emergency havers. Callers are not, right? The people from the public do not, it's not part of their routine daily life to have some type of emergency where they have to make a phone call and provide information and request assistance. This could be the first time that this is ever happening to them. But this could be the millionth call of my career.
Sure. So
it kind of puts it in perspective that we're good at this and the general public is not, nor should they be expected to be, right?
At the core of every community beats the heart of the first responders, ever present on the front line, making the impossible look routine. Through the relentless pressure and the unseen scars, our frontline warriors silently battle the stress of the job. It's crucial they armor up mentally and emotionally, not just for the community they safeguard, but for the families they return to. Supporting the wellness and mental health of first responders is priority number one. By championing their well-being, we're ensuring they're unstoppable, both in the line of duty and in life. Step up for the Titans who protect us. Because when they're firing on all cylinders, they're not just first responders, they're game changers. Join us. Visit ResponderTV.com to be the difference.
So I was just having this thought, this parallel thought of what a hostage negotiator has to maintain control of his or her voice and negotiate with the suspect. You're a crisis negotiator, really. You're having to negotiate with the person in crisis in order to get vital information, and you're going to have to use your voice and be calm yourself, and that can have a mirroring effect, on the caller. They can, if you have a very calm tone of voice, they call that prosody, right? As you adjust your tone of voice, then that has a more calming effect on the hysterical caller. So you're using psychology.
Yeah, you're using basically reverse psychology, huh? To glean that information. And so dispatchers are trained to use the volume, tone, and inflection of their voice in order to do exactly what you just described.
Yeah. And do you ever get trained in that?
Yeah, when you go through a dispatch academy in most states, your initial set of training as part of onboarding usually involves little tricks like that. Yeah. And as you complete that training, and then definitely as you go back to your agency, to a communication center, and then you're working with a training officer, the training officer then will help you hone in that skill set so that you can master it.
Cool. Let's shift gears into something we talk about often, and that's the staffing crisis, probably affecting 911 as much, if not more, than any other area of first responder world. With that in mind, there's sort of an urgency to bring on more people. Obviously, we want to retain more people. What are your thoughts about practical solutions for that?
That is a tough challenge that has just plagued, not to your point, not just the 911 industry, but lots of fields of public safety the last few years. 911 is no different than law enforcement, EMS, fire services, and that we struggle sometimes to find the qualified candidates. And then once we find them, to help them successfully complete a very robust and rigorous training program. And then even once they complete that, retaining them beyond, 2 to 5 years.
Right.
I think a lot of first responders experience such strong feelings of compassion fatigue and burnout by year 3 that they were not planning on, that it is eye-opening to them sometimes regarding the career that they chose for themselves. And now with a lot of other things going on in life, in society here in the United States, I think people just ask themselves, why would I work a stressful job like public safety where I'm exposed to significant amounts of trauma and stress when I can go work somewhere else for almost a similar competitive wage and not have to deal with that? And those are hard questions that we don't really have answers for.
Yeah.
But definitely, LT, I think the way that we market ourselves has to change. I think we've done a poor job in the past of, I want to say, marketing our respective fields of public safety. 911 and law enforcement specifically are very paramilitary. So we've relied on people showing up in the full Class A uniform at some type of recruitment job fair, all polished up and buttoned down, and tabletop displays, and we wait for people to come to us, and there's this very standoffish visual appearance to that. It's not very warm and welcoming, and I think that approach might have served its purpose long ago, but it doesn't anymore. And you can argue now that that's a generational difference, because millennials and Gen Z have different values that are important to them as people, and they look for jobs and careers that reestablish those values in their life. And if public safety agencies don't do a good job of marketing to that, then we miss out on those people. And that is part of the reason why we have struggled with the staffing challenge, because we just can't keep up with replacing the baby boomers and then Gen X as Gen X starts to slowly hit retirement age.
Yeah. Right. So how can agencies support their staff, and their mental health, so that they are compelled to stay longer and feel like, okay, yes, this is a challenging job, but as long as I take care of myself, I'm able to do it. So what ideas do you have about that?
Well, I think, when in the past, when we've talked about wellness, it's been very a very traditional approach. Wellness is eat, sleep, and exercise. And we know that wellness is a lot more comprehensive than that. Those are just 3 very small pieces of the greater pie regarding wellness. And so I think agencies need to do a better job of taking a more comprehensive approach to addressing all aspects of wellness. And if that means, enhancing external services and employee assistance programs, and then even creating new wellness initiatives with incentives for employees, and that's what you have to get creative to do. But one of the things that we love at the 911 Training Institute is we have the saying, no cookie cutter solutions.
Okay.
Which means that, what works really well at small town fire department is not going to work the same or well at all at big city fire department, even though those 2 agencies might be right next door to each other. Their operations are just different. And so type of wellness initiative and program to enhance the experiences of employees to support them needs to be custom tailored to that agency's operations and the employees who serve there. So we can talk conceptually and theoretically, but at the end of the day, it takes some consulting expertise to figure out, what are the unique challenges that your agency is experiencing, and then what kind of initiatives and incentives can we create to support the employees serving at this agency, because it's not the same as an agency on the other side of the county, certainly not the same as an agency on the other side of the country, right?
Right.
So with that in mind, let's say I'm an HR director at a large city agency, and I'm coming to you for initiatives and incentives to recruit new people and keep the people that we have. What kinds of things would you suggest? I'm giving you a generic example, of course, but what kinds of things have you found were effective to accomplish those goals?
Well, the things that we advocate for are things like a peer support team and a CISM team, first and foremost, to help the employees who are currently serving at that agency. I think you got to help your own who are currently working before you try to come up with a strategy that's going to draw in new people through recruitment. We got to support our own people first. And things like a peer support team and a CISM team is going to help mitigate some of the trauma and stressors related to those critical calls. And if you're an HR director, my next question would be, okay, what kind of current programs do we offer through EAP services? And what kind of contracts does, the city or the county where we work, what kind of contracts do we have set up with contracted services of other culturally competent experts who can come in and provide those services? And it's not just mental health at that point, because we're looking at general employee assistance programs that could include things like financial wellness, lots of other things, not just a mental health professional. So then that's when you have to start getting creative with, how much money do we have to work with, and how can we get creative with that amount of money to get the services we need that will support our people.
Because I don't care how much you love this job, at some point you're not doing this job forever.
If our families are so important to us, why is the divorce rate so high?
You have to stay vigilant. You have to stay aware. The problem is, when you get home or when you're out in public, you run the risk of not being able to turn that off.
And to comment on the CISM, the critical incident stress management, like I find it's imperative for if a department's going to do a debrief, a CISD, they have to include dispatch. Like it really, I feel like there's something missing, and even having like a multi-dimensional debrief, with like say it's because I work with a police department, I would say, well, did fire show up? And do you think any of them are bothered by the call? And how about dispatch? Why don't we get the call or see if they're available to come to the debrief? And it makes for a much more like holistic, well-rounded story.
Yes.
It's not an after action review, but it's like, at least you get to figure out and appreciate what each person had to endure.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, that has to happen more. There has to, we have to include, especially if there's a police debrief, if it makes sense to absolutely include the dispatcher that was involved.
Well, I think agencies, for the most part, have, in the last 10 years, done a really good job of doing debriefings more often after those types of critical
Yeah.
But to your point, ma'am, I think sometimes we get so solely focused on one specific field of public safety that
right.
we become narrow-minded with tunnel vision at looking at the incident only through one lens. And you're right, it doesn't then provide you the comprehensive picture and the totality of everything that happened. And bringing people together like that also creates a sense of camaraderie, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do some wonderful things to just boost overall morale. And so you
collaboration. It's a collaborative event anyway.
Right. You got to do things like that.
And I'm sure for 911 professionals especially can bring some closure to the incident where they may not have found out what was the final outcome of the event, which must be huge because so many times people in that world don't get to find out how did the patient wind up, how did the call resolve, what was the end result, and it's got to really, I would imagine, improve job satisfaction a little bit to have that.
Right. I was fortunate enough in my career. The agency I worked at was large, but still just small enough that if I wanted to find something out, it was relatively easy for me to ping one of the officers who responded to the scene to ask them a question, whether it was typing messages on a computer or, hey, can you call me real quick? Right. But there's a lot of other communication centers in the country, especially in the Midwest, that are consolidated, that provide dispatch services to multiple agencies. So they don't have that personal contact and relationship with their field responders that I was fortunate enough to have. And it's a lot more challenging for them to say, type a message or to say, hey, can you call me? Because of the operations at that agency.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. That's just another very unique stressor that dispatchers experience, because dispatchers in those larger consolidated communication centers don't always have the chance to know the outcomes of some of those calls.
Right. So, right. And the psyche.
The analogy is, hey, imagine picking up a book and only reading the first 2 chapters.
Right.
And as you start to get invested in the storyline and then the characters, then you put the book down and you pick up a new book and you start reading. So nothing ever comes to completion.
Sure.
And that aspect is critical to helping your brain process the stress and trauma to which you're exposed in handling the phone call or the radio.
Right. The psyche wants closure. That's a fact.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, can you take a moment and brag about this award that you won, Telecommunicator of the Year? Tell us when that happened and what did that involve? You can brag.
It sounds like a really creative thing that you accomplished there. So tell us, give us the backstory on it.
APCO International is the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials. I believe it's the oldest and largest 911 public safety communications membership organization in the world.
Okay.
In the United States, they have chapters. Most of those chapters are statewide, but here in California, it was prior split into Northern California and Southern California, just because the state is so large. But recently, last year, even that was reconsolidated. So now there's just one chapter of APCO in California. It's California APCO. But in 2012, I was nominated to receive that award because of some things I was doing in my career, and was fortunate enough to be the recipient in 2012.
Talk a little bit more, if you don't mind, about what you created there, because I looked at it and it sounds like you found a way to acknowledge young people, right, who got in a situation where they had to activate 911. What was that all about?
Yeah, so I tried to bring concepts of community policing and problem-oriented policing to dispatch. Those are very popular philosophies in law enforcement to try and guide law enforcement agencies in establishing relationships to better collaborate with members of the community in which they serve. And then through that collaboration, those folks become the eyes and the ears, and there's just a better trusted relationship between law enforcement and the public. And the city of Anaheim, the Anaheim Police Department, embraced those philosophies. We had very specialized units of police officers, and they were community policing officers. So their duties and responsibilities wasn't responding to general calls for service. Their duties and responsibilities were going out, identifying specific challenges in specific areas of the city, and then collaborating with stakeholders who either lived or worked nearby to provide solutions to said challenge to increase the overall quality of life for people in that area. And since I started my career on the law enforcement end before I went into 911, I was familiar with those philosophies and I loved them. I just loved them. And so as I became a dispatcher, I thought, how come we can't bring more of that into, say, dispatch? So that's what I started to do. And through doing some of that public outreach to engage the community, we created a public education program. And within that public education program, we came to realize, well, if we're out here preaching to the public about the proper use of the 911 emergency system, doesn't it just make sense to give them kudos and commendation when they do what we tell them to do?
Yes.
And so we jumped on an opportunity because we realized, well, we can't do this for everyone. Who do we want to do this for? We had a very special experience with a child caller one time. And that kind of became the catalyst in us developing a program where we presented public award to children under very specific circumstances for criteria that we created. Once that criteria was met, it kind of went through a flow chart of approval of the powers that be through command staff. And once it was all signed off, and if the parents and family were willing, we would invite them to our department where we would provide a public award to a child recipient. And what we realized is, it provided a very special experience, not just for that child and their family, but also the dispatcher.
Oh, sure.
It gave us an opportunity then to also recognize our own. If we're going to recognize the child who called about this emergency, then doesn't it only make sense to also recognize the dispatcher? And at that point, are there other members of the agency then who would qualify for official commendation due to this critical incident that was So it was a very special program that I would like to think that it touched a lot of lives, not just externally through the public, but then also internally. Because it provided us the opportunity to say good job to one another.
Sure.
And we do and still do a terrible job of that, I think, in all fields of public safety.
Wow.
Yeah, that's an incredible point. Well, as we wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to mention regarding your work? And I especially appreciate the fact that you're an outreach director. Anything, any initiatives you're working on right now that are pertinent to 911?
A lot of initiatives. How much time do we have?
How about the top three?
The 911 Training Institute is very active in creatively coming up with projects and initiatives that we can instill that will empower not just 911 professionals now, but also their working relationships with all first responders regarding optimizing everyone's health and wellness. So my job as the outreach director is to do a lot of outreach and engagement. So more often than not, you can find me speaking at various conferences throughout the country, delivering sessions, and then also here locally where I live at a police academy and a dispatch academy in the county where I live. But we love kicking off these initiatives because it's the long-term goal that If we save the life and the career of one first responder, then that's why we're here, and that's why we do what we do. Because, like I said earlier, we want first responders to feel empowered to leave the job on their terms when it's right for them, instead of feeling like things like post-traumatic stress and vicarious trauma just got the better of them and forced their hand in making an early retirement when they love the job that they did.
Sure.
So then how can we create, curriculum, training curriculum, and then other programs, and then establish external partnerships to deliver services that will help empower first responders to experience that decision-making process and ownership of themselves and what they believe is best, not just for them, but also their families too.
Well, huge game changer, and kudos for those initiatives and all the other ones that you're working on. Ryan, it's been great. Please share with us where people can find you, 911 Training Institute, social media channels, all that good stuff.
Yeah, the 911 Training Institute is active on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn just by searching 911 Training Institute. And you can visit our website at www.911training.net. And that's where you can contact us directly about the things that we're doing. And we invite people to reach out so that we can have conversations like this.
Fantastic. Stacy, any final comments?
I think it's great what you're doing. This was not around when my dad was a dispatcher. He started out as a patrol officer, and then he was a dispatcher for a couple of years. And, there was no mental health support or training or any of that back in the 80s. So I'm really excited for the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that.
Ryan Dedmon, thank you so much for being with us today and for getting up early in the morning out there on the West Coast. We appreciate you and all the things you're doing, and please say hi to Jim Marshall for us.
I will do that. Thank you, sir. Ma'am, it's been a pleasure.
All right, thank you.
Remember to like and subscribe YouTube, Responder Resilience, Facebook, Responder Wellness Inc., and Responder TV. We're on LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and check out our website, respondertv.com, for past episodes and guest information. Till the next time, stay safe. Be kind to yourself. Take care.